Hey, Brendan.
How's it going, Dave Vincent?
I've been sick with something for about a week, so I'm
no,
trying to carry on, but I want to crawl back under a rock. How are you?
I'm doing all right. Get well soon.
It's good. We did a COVID test and ruled that out because it's like slowly crept through the family, but who knows? Let's see here. It's just pulling up the HackMD as well.
We didn't have anything on the agenda, so I figured I'll just jump on and see if there was looking through issues or anything like that.
Yeah, no, I think that's good, and we can turn the meeting into that. I've actually had a little bit of that this past week or so. There's a few things that are thankfully thrusting my attention back into the low-level container runtime. So it's been a weird couple of years, and I've had my hands off the keyboard a lot. So I'm happy to dive back in. Let me grab some coffee. I'll be right back.
Sure.
Okay, this is called Really Isn't Happening. Okay.
It's kind of quasi happening. We'll see.
Sure. Fine.
Since I see you here, though, there was something that came out earlier in another meeting that might relate to
Amy, don't come in here
lurking around.
What things? Yeah, no. How are you?
I was really just coming in to lurk, but it sounds like okay, we had like it you might need me for something. Yeah.
Unrelated to OCI stuff, but you've got the CNCF calendar, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, they wanted to change the CNCF S-tags working group on supply chain.
Oh God. Okay.
Doc link. The doc link.
Oh. Yeah. Have them drop me an email because it's gonna be way easier to track. But yeah, like happy to fix that.
Yeah. I was I know who.
There's a longer term goal of being able to have somehow manage the calendar through Git, and yet in the year of our Lord 2020, calendaring is still one of our most challenging.
Just today I dialed into 2 different meetings that were not happening because apparently they must have canceled one and shifted them over, and it was now different from my I was like,
You weren't meant to be at that meeting anyways. I don't know what to
obviously.
Yeah, no.
Just good.
Go with God is basically you're supposed to be in that meeting anyways.
That's fantastic.
All right, so for this meeting that isn't happening because there's clearly no agenda here.
No, and that's what I was just refilling coffee, and I'm going to turn it into kind of a pruning session because I've had a few of those things running down this week.
My previous meeting was myself and Brandon. And so it was a Brandon and Brandon meeting. So now we have the Michael and Michael meeting here. And we'll just deconfuse it by just using your last name instead. Oh, no.
I was going to say, but not just Michael, but Michael Brown. Could y'all pick a different name? Sorry. It's good.
One of us will go by the first name, the other one will go with the last name. It won't be confusing to anybody.
You can call me Brownie. Or Mikey.
Okay.
All right. So you guys.
So the way there is no real meeting today.
There's no real meeting. There's no real meeting. I was just going to actually. It sounded like there's a couple of issues possibly to talk through. So if you don't have a particular thing to raise, then it's good. I think there's I think the reference group was the big thing to get it like into a working group, and then there's probably just like general tidiness and momentum to do and cleanup that has been lingering for a while, and some of that actually just needs maintainers. So maintainer consensus. And I've seen more maintainers getting involved on the issues. So usually this meeting was just like if maintainers couldn't bubble it up on an issue. So no worries. Were there particular issues, Brendan?
No, not really. I just figured I was jumping on just to watch and see what things we wanted to chat about. I know we've done some of the pruning things in the past, and it was productive.
Brandon, we're making these kind of meetings a habit.
Do what?
Brandon and I were on the working group meeting on Tuesday, which was also similarly without an agenda.
Yeah, I mean, we found that even like some of the community calls, especially when there's a lot going on, are really good sync, like touch base things. But I think this community, particularly since it is like tends to be more spec oriented, they tend to be longer and like more boring timelines, and like there'll be flurries of activity and then like nothing. It's been very normal over the life cycle of it. So as some folks jump in and jump off, that they might feel like it's too boring, not worth their time, but it's just like in the life cycle of it, kind of a slow moving.
Yeah, trying to get Kubernetes out the door right now. And they're having their monthly community meeting. So that's probably pulling some people.
I saw a
Oh,
bunch of
interesting.
notifications on releases.
We're sort of stuck getting 124 out the door. So that's keeping me busy. Lots of CI/CD test bugs as we roll Docker shim out.
Probably not entirely, I mean, to bike shed here, but I am wondering, since it's come up a few times, and it is kind of an interesting point of how bound together the image spec is with the distribution spec.
Yeah.
How best to put together what an ideal state of what these things should look like, given like, generic artifact or generic manifests or otherwise, and then like images specifically just being a type of blob or manifest, and how those are all effectively bound to some aspect of the distribution spec. I feel like the way that the community grew is different from how the ideal framing of how they all relate is now.
That came up, we were talking about the outputs of the working group, and should it be a changed image spec or another spec or in the OCI artifact repo. And I think the push I was hearing was it needs to be a new spec for the artifact media type. I understand that, I get that, and I can work with that. The gotcha is going to be that descriptor field, because that's always over in the image specs. We're always going to have links going from one side to the other.
And that's where, like, if something like that descriptor is actually like, we created this descriptor, we defined it before the distribution spec existed. Let's just actually punt it over to the distribution spec.
What do we want to do? Go alias? And that way, anybody that's got existing code still works, but the alias points over, and so the new location would register as the same object.
You're talking in Golang implementation specifically?
Yeah,
that's
I'm thinking
fine.
When you move it from one spec to the other.
Yeah, something that's just defined across. if it really comes down to just the descriptor, and that the image spec repo only has like stuff about that manifest and config particularly and layout.
Even layout might make sense to move over, because layout feels more distribution than it does the image spec itself.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. And suddenly we have a room full of people.
I know. No agenda, everybody shows up.
The layout, it is interesting. Okay.
Foreshadowing on layout, I'll be talking about that at the Open Source Summit.
The what? Shadowing on the layout?
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing.
I've got a talk accepted for that one.
Good. I'll open it. Okay. I'm going to open an issue while we're talking, and if anybody else wants to discuss something while I'm clicky clacking.
I figure we just guess what you're typing based on the sounds of the clicks. That's how it works, right?
Mm.
Is that a keyboard or a typewriter?
I mean,
it's an impressive sound.
Clickety clack, mechanic.
Kinesis.
There you go.
I like it.
Nice.
Yeah.
He mounted his microphone underneath the plastic right next to the switches, just so that we could hear it properly.
As is intended.
That is important. Now, when I think about the high-level structure and layout and things we need to define, we were talking earlier about authentication and how that would make sense to have at least associated probably with distribution spec, if not a separate spec. The other one I've been thinking about is the image reference, not to be confused with the reference type discussion we're having over on the working group, but the image reference being like, how do you expand Alpine to docker.io/Alpine library/Alpine:\latest, and what that field looks like when you take it different places. Been seeing the request for things like when we put on the file system with the image layout, should there be a reference for how that looks? And so might be another area to look at. But I've definitely seen questions of where is it standardized that this thing that talks to Docker Hub gets expanded out? You know, where is that spec specified? And it's just like, we all just kind of know. And that's not the best answer to people.
Yep. It's in the code.
That's exactly where it is.
I had a similar question about redirects for blob downloads. It seems like a pretty common pattern for registries, but it's was in the Docker spec or Docker API docs, but not carried over into the OCI distribution spec.
Yeah, and I mean, maybe Michael, if you want to open a, I think that discussion last I saw effectively culminated that if it's already teased out in an actual like IETF RFC, then like let's defer to those.
Right.
So even if we want to just specifically like add a notice of like regarding redirects or certain like, because I know this has even come up in like header handling and some other stuff of like, you know, even if you want to point to the RFC or just say we're intentionally deferring to IETF RFC like for redirects, like this is an established UGB pattern.
I think for client behavior that makes sense. The distribution spec though says that I believe it says registries must return 200 with this blob data, right? Which seems like a little bit stronger
Yeah.
for the server than we actually want to specify.
Yeah. I mean, and I know we've had some discussions around like you should have the blob, you know, whatever, like it kind of implies it's in with existing within the registry, maybe not necessarily where you're hosting it. Huh. So asterisk should return a 200 asterisk or IETF, you know, rules around redirects.
Hmm.
Yeah, that makes sense. Next one to eventually turn into a 200 is something that can imply that a little bit easier than it does now.
So maybe a top level, not even specific to the blob, but just at the top level of all the responses, just saying redirects are allowed as long as it goes to whatever the ultimate. I know I got broken not too long ago by somebody that they're putting in the 443 as the port number on the registry name. And then the blob pool redirected them to just HTTPS on the URL. And that broke things for me. I tried to tell them they don't need 443. They didn't believe me.
Didn't the folks from the ZOT community try to implement something based on the spec and come up with inconsistencies? I feel like there should have been some follow-up with what those inconsistencies were, so it could have been addressed in the spec. That was a long time ago, though.
Yeah, as soon as you said that, I'm trying to remember because I do remember that they were trying to stick to the spec itself, but I don't remember what the outcome of that or if that was even like pre 1.0.
I think that was pre 1.0. Haven't heard anything from them since.
The repo had merged 2 days ago, so it's still active.
I think they created a fork of distribution and image in order to take care of the discrepancies. But I didn't see any like attempts to upstream any of those changes. Hi, Sam. I thought you were on vacation.
I am on vacation, but I figured I would say hi to everyone. So, hi,
Oh,
everyone.
Hi.
Here I am going on vacation and not going to OCI meetings, making me look bad.
There's a way you can look good.
I wasn't on vacation and I still didn't come. This is the first one I'm attended after a long time.
Yeah, it's good. Right before the flush of people joined, we were just saying that like in the life of the group, it's, you know, certain things get very active at times, and then activity falls off, even though there's still plenty to do. So I think we're right now like there's a space where people are active on issues. The mailing list is mostly quiet. But in these last, you know, couple of months of calls here have been pretty quiet. I mean, there's been conversation, but it's not been just like packed agenda and people trying to get things talked through. So it's been pretty chill. So I think that's pretty normal in the life of the project. Still means there's stuff to get done, but the intensity of which kind of calms down.
VBET, do you have anything else, or did the thought just kind of trail off?
You know, I'm not feeling 100% here lately, so it could be both of those.
Sorry, I did not mean to like call you out and things. Never mind. Moving on.
No, it's good. It's pretty simple. Just open up an issue for that. I don't know. I mean, like some of those things, like the definitions around annotations or otherwise, seem like they're pretty generic as well, but not even to distribution. But yeah, the image layout was made as a thing to be able to make it distributable, so that makes sense. But the descriptor very much, I think, could move over. Good. No, I don't have any other particular issues. Does anybody have anything urgent that they would like to make heard?
Do we have image spec maintainers to clear out some of the PR list over there? So we got a few look like they're ready.
No, I think I'm the only one on this call.
Are you technically an image spec maintainer?
Yes, sir.
Doesn't list you on the reviewer list.
That's cute. The
That's not me picking, like, throwing shade or anything. That was just me being confused.
did I open the PR?
Shucks, yeah, I'm looking at the add GCR one. So
Yeah,
that could
I
explain it. Let me look at it
was about
better.
to say
There you are. Okay.
it has been tricky sometimes to keep the teams in sync with the maintainers, now also in sync with the code owners. I think we should actually redo the code owner so it's not everybody's individual names but the whole group name.
So if we don't have enough maintainers for image spec, do we have maintainers for any of the other specs?
Can I raise a related question?
Yes, please.
So the folks in the reference type working group are almost done with creating a proposal and would like to bring it up to the community. But
Mhm.
if there are no maintainers of the image and distribution spec available, how are we going to get feedback?
Are there no maintainers that are participating in the working group?
Not that I can think of. Brandon?
Thought that was part of what we had put down as owners, is that there was at least one maintainer as an owner of the working group as well.
Oh, we've got John Johnson, but he is unavailable for an intermediate time.
Yeah, I've tried to be involved somewhat, but John was the kind of delegate there. He's been on paternity leave, I think.
Can anyone step
But-
in for him?
I think so. What is exactly, is it just for a review, or is it like, because usually particularly CCing people or otherwise is a way to get maintainers in there, but that doesn't, I guess, always rally everybody, or unless it's time zone sensitive.
I'm pretty sure that we have some major changes that we're proposing to both image and distribution spec. So it
Mhm.
would be nice to have at least one maintainer from either one of those specs to take a look at it. Actually, now would be a good time to, have one of them take a look at it.
Thinking
Okay.
I was going to channel Mike
put a
Brown,
link to that?
AWS, but he just had to run.
Can you put a link to that in the HackMD of the what to review?
Yeah.
And it's
pull that
and by when? What's the timeline?
I think we're still going through it on our side. But I'll throw we had it from last time, so I'll just pull it back up.
Yeah, we're still going through it, but my opinion is that it is almost close to what we would like.
Yeah, and our
That's good.
discussion.
I feel like it's as good as it can get.
Yeah, and the discussion that I was having with a few people earlier this week, including Mike Brown, the other Mike Brown. There were some comments from the registry maintainer side that I want to make sure that we get covered, because I think a lot of what we've been pushing forward so far has been from the end user side, building the client side half of this. And we can recommend whatever we want to recommend, but if the people maintaining the registry say, that's great, but we can't implement that at scale, and so we're not going to implement it, defeats a lot of what we're trying to implement. So I hadn't heard the criticism until earlier this week. And so I want to make sure to give them a little bit of time to figure out how we can reconcile any concerns they have. And specifically, there are people here that might either maintain a registry or know about maintaining registries here. The concerns we were raising, and I might as well go ahead and just present if we're going to talk about it. The concerns they had were talking about, get some things moved over here. We were proposing some filtering and other solutions for how to do sorting and filtering. And we talked about doing that. Some of their concerns were, yeah, that's nice to do if you want to do sorting and filtering, but they weren't necessarily sure that they want to support something like these queries against all annotations. They wanted to limit and say, yeah, you can filter, but we only want you to filter on our 3 annotations. That way we can put it into a database somewhere and index off of it and implement those queries. And so that's where we need to figure out what makes the most sense for them and how we can keep both the users happy and them happy. Because if you tell the users they can't filter on all the fields, that raises other concerns where people are saying, hey, I wanted to find out all of the artifacts that were signed by a specific signer. I don't want to have to define all these individual fields everywhere. So it's going to be a back and forth between the two sides of this. But I will say, I put this syntax in there, and this was kind of just me Googling around and finding someone else that had some kind of query syntax. I'm not proud of it. If someone has a better option, please. I'm well aware that it's not the prettiest. And if there's something nicer, throw it at me.
Yeah, I don't know how best to do that, especially if the filter has more than one statement, or if the field if the field was base 64 encoded and it ended in the equal sign, it gets screwed up.
So field here is going to be URL encoded instead of base 64 encoded. The whole this whole thing is URL encoded. And if there are multiple filters, they would be multiple field equals on your URL parameter. But just how do you know when you're parsing the string when to stop reading the field, start reading the operator, and then start reading the value? It's I saw the little equal, and then someone said, well, not equal, it's just equal, not equal. And that made all the other things fall out with it. An easy enough to parse syntax, it's just not pretty. And so when things aren't pretty, I always say, if someone's got something pretty, please, I'm very happy to take options.
Okay.
That's a little bit more bike shedding. The bigger concern they had was just the field itself that we're talking about is any annotation. If we go back up to where an artifact is, any annotation that gets thrown on the artifact could potentially be queried against. And there's some hesitation from that on the registry side of, do we want to allow that?
It's been asked for a long time, but that same concern has come up of imposing such a.
So for anyone that runs registries, feel free to chime in. What do you think? Because I just break your servers, I don't fix them. I'll try to fix them later on.
Good. So thanks for raising the timeliness of it. I'll put that on a to do some review there and at least figure out what impact of like how to navigate the impact of it.
Now, I think we did bring up the fact that a client can filter, but that would be very inefficient, which is why the proposal here has the server-side filtering. So I get the feeling that it's not a blocker, but it would be really nice to have.
It's a significant value add. And so
Yeah.
the one other question I'll throw out there is near term, assuming we can get this sorted out. Sorry for the scrolling. We are talking about adding a new field onto image spec. And so how easy is that to make happen? And hopefully we can suggest that field once we know that this is how we want to, this is exactly what we need to be able to do for long term for adding that reference API later on. And so making sure that getting this added is something that the image spec maintainers are going to be comfortable with. That's important. Artifact spec, we're assuming we're going to have to open another spec in another repo and get that pushed in. So that I'm assuming goes up to the OCI talk or something like that to get a new repo created and approved and go through that spec creation process. There is a process. I'm sure Sam knows it better than I do. And so I need to follow it. And then assuming all that happens and the API is, I'm sure, going to be distribution spec. The other one I had a question on was that we're talking about digest tags and how to define, here's a tag syntax we can use to associate for the registries that don't have the API. A client can query this tag and find all the references with a V1 registry that's out there today. And the question comes up, where do we define these tags? Is that distribution spec? Do we want just another file and distribution spec? Does this go somewhere else? We never really defined this before anywhere else.
Didn't we? Hold on. Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be just Vincent answering these questions. Other people can propose file names too.
Yeah, okay. Interesting. Yeah, you're okay.
So on Nisha's topic of presenting to maintainers. I see on the original working group proposal that Derek McGowan was listed as an owner there, and it looks like he's been participating at least on this most recent proposal. He's a maintainer of the distribution spec.
Yeah, Derek was here this past week, and a lot of times we actually do get Josh in there. He just had to miss this past week, so slight rotation. So we do get some maintainers pop in and out.
Yeah, Josh has been pretty active.
Mhm.
Um,
That covers us on distribution spec, but less so on image spec.
right.
It's good. I think some of this almost, so this particular digest tags piece of it could go back into probably the distribution spec, because I feel like that's generic enough and it should have been addressed there, but it does get into that kind of like the whole string piece that you were talking about earlier.
Yeah, the syntax for that tag itself is what we're proposing.
Yep.
And so it follows along with what some other projects have done. Kind of, they threw it out there. We made a couple tweaks to it of how it should be formatted, but not too significantly. So you think just another file in distribution spec and we're good over there?
I think so. I mean, like this, the I guess the thing here is that it's this is actually, yeah, I think if I over there, I could get into bike shedding this, but yeah.
Yeah,
I'll hold my tongue.
we are defining a convention. I'm happy to chat with you anytime you want to chat about bike shedding.
Yep.
And so it's a way that two different clients can interact with each other across a registry that isn't updated, but both clients are updated.
The part that I was about to descend into and was looking just to see if it wasn't already expressly defined, and is when you actually have the image reference with the digest on it. So not as a tag, but as an @ symbol. And I think that
turns
actually
into an @ this turns into a colon, and there's nothing after.
Sure, but I'm just saying that actually I think that we're actually lacking this same level of definition for the @ symbol and a markup. And I don't want the definition of those two things to be confusing with each other.
Yeah, that goes back to we haven't defined what a
yeah, I know
what a reference spec is. Yeah,
that's what you're saying. Yeah. So yeah, a file there, and then we could probably then also add the other so that it's more fully defined.
And here when we define it over in distribution spec, all we would be defining is the tag. We wouldn't be defining the overall general how a reference looks. Just to avoid stepping on that minefield today, we can step on it tomorrow.
Blimpie's burgers. Good.
Okay. Yeah, so that is helpful. At least lets me know where I need to start putting my changes. I've started working a little bit on what the change to image spec is going to look like, which we've got an old PR sitting from way back out. I think Dan had been the one that proposed it a while back for adding a reference type to all the different objects. I stripped that down to the bare minimum what we need, which was just a reference on just the image manifest and nothing else. And so I've got that sitting in my queue to eventually send up as a PR once we agree that that's what we want to do.
Sounds good.
Anything more over here? Nisha, any other concerns you're thinking of?
No, I'm excited to see this land.
You and me both. I could check my notes and see if there was anything else we came out with in our discussion a couple of days ago, because I know we were back and forth on a lot of different topics in this one bunch of concerns that they had. Here, let me do it this way. Put it in the other monitor so that we're both reading together. Yeah, I know last time we were talking of whether or not the version bump, I will resist a version bump as much as I can in image spec when we make these changes, just because keeping that version the same is how I get my backward compatibility with all the existing clients. So if I can avoid a version bump, I will be pushing for that with all my might. There were questions about like an S3 backed registry, what performance and capabilities on a registry with that kind of backing would look like for filtering by all the annotations. And that's where registry operators are welcome to give me input on how everything I'm doing is terrible. Another one that they had come up with, and it's been mentioned a little bit, I think this was AWS Mike Brown mentioning it, was whether a data field made more sense than promoting up the annotations, since we've already approved the data field. We're talking about in the response API that we would pull up all the annotations from whatever object we had in there, so that if you needed client-side filtering, you could. But also just giving the client all the data they need when they're looking at this. And so the comment came back, does it make sense to pull up all the annotations, or should we just put a data field here for the manifest we're pointing to? And I can see both sides of that. The one thing that I thought of after the meeting was that, what if that manifest itself has a data field that we're pointing to? They might want to pull up everything into that manifest and make that, get as close to that for meg limit as they can to make it only one pull. And so then if you then rebase encode all of that and put that up here as another data field, you're now pushing a bunch of limits. So I'm feeling like annotations might be a better level for this one, but I am open to people saying otherwise. Bless you, Vincent. Hope you're getting better. And let's see. Yeah, so anybody that has comments on the data field, chime in. I'm just reading this last bullet here. Yeah, the last bullet, go ahead.
Oh yeah, one thing I think would be useful to for bringing up all the annotations is if an artifact type doesn't exist in IANA yet, then someone can probably put in their own artifact type and description for their own clients to recognize and act on.
Yeah, I think the direction they were going was to say, look, we're going to have this media type, the size digest. We define this data field that could also be at the same level. It'll be part of the descriptor. So instead of going up here and saying, give me all the annotations on this thing, let me pull all these up, you could also say in here, let me base 64 this entire manifest, which includes all the annotations, the media type on this thing, all the other details in here. Just the whole thing, base 64, the whole thing, drop that in as a data field over here in the response to the API. And that kind of works. I think it still solves what you're looking for, Nisha, but the flip side that I'm worried about is, okay, yeah, that's great until you've got these config and layers, and these layers themselves might have a few data types dispersed within there. The config itself might be injected as a data type. So you've pulled back a lot more data than I think some people are initially hoping for if this manifest starts to grow.
Wasn't there a size limit on the data field?
Not on the data field, but on the overall manifest, we've said this should not exceed 4 megabytes.
Okay.
And so if this doesn't exceed 4 megabytes here, if you base 64 encode it, it could exceed 4 megabytes.
Yeah, okay.
But the annotations themselves would always be less than that because they're a subset. So there's back and forth on that one, think in both directions. And then again, the discussion of whether or not we want to have all annotations, a subset of annotations. There are different challenges. All right, sorry, Vince, hope you get better soon. So yeah, any thoughts people have on whether or not to pull all the annotations up? Otherwise, sorry, now my voice is cracking here in Vensko. Hope you didn't give me anything. The other question I think we'll have in general is we're getting a couple pieces here together that we think we can do right now, like the reference field on the image spec, like the digest description for the tags. So yeah, wouldn't it, Tammy? So in terms of, we've got a few things we think we can do now. And so would it make sense to get these initial things out there into the specs today so that people can start using this for references today, put their things up there using the OCI artifact definition, which puts them in an image spec, start using it, start putting their things out there that they have been waiting for all this time. And then we can take the later time to sort out an actual implementation, hopefully over in distribution, test out all of our reference APIs, things like that, to make sure it looks good before we actually submit that up as a change for this group. And so I'm thinking it makes sense to break it into 2 parts. If there are any concerns of, no, you need to go through and do the whole distribution before you push up any changes to image spec, I'll be disappointed, but let me know now if that's the case. That'll be good. Nisha, is that thumbs up to make everything one massive change instead of breaking it up?
No, breaking
Okay.
it up.
Okay, good. You were gonna disappoint me otherwise.
No, I think breaking it up and helps, provide the more gradual upgrade path that you were looking for.
Yeah, well, it's a gradual upgrade path for the spec itself. It gives us a little bit more time to make sure we're doing it right on that reference API to test it out. But it gets rid of this backlog where I think users want to try this out today and we should be ready for them. Well, we're not ready for them. They're already ready to try to do it. So we should try to catch up to them.
They're waiting with bated breath to test this out.
So that's all I've got. Without Vincent here, I feel like we're a ship without a rudder again. Any other thoughts to the last 5 minutes, or should I give you all a break back and let everybody go use the hand sanitizer, make sure nothing else spreads?
You're a funny guy, Brandon.
I try the best I can.
Cool.
Want to keep folks entertained so that this is actually worth attending.
Oh man.
Don't gargle it. Oh man, this is why we have Amy here.
Rules,
We have
man.
to have Amy for the good comments.
Here for rules. The notes about the Slack being broken for OCI. Yeah, we know about it. There's something weird going on. Chris knows about it. But if you need any help, just send them my way. I'll happy to be able to invite people in. It's fine.
Thank you, Amy.
Okay.
Cheers,
rules,
everybody.
rules are done now. We're done now.
Awesome. Well, 4 minutes back, folks. Sam, don't
See
waste
you
all
all.
your vacation time on meetings.
Yeah. Thank you, Brandon.
Thank you all.
Bye all.